Picking up where we left off in part 1, we're moving on to part 2, and this time I'm going to show you 6 of the most haunting photos ever taken. The photo of Isabella Guzman. The story begins with Isabella Guzman, who was born into a family in Aurora, Colorado, to parents Robert Guzman and Yunmi Hoy. Her family life was said to be troubled. Her parents divorced when she was young, and Isabella lived with her mother and stepfather, Ryan Hoy. The family had once been members of the Jehovah's Witnesses, but at the age of 14, Isabella decided to leave the religion, which caused a rift in her relationship with her mother. Tensions began to grow between Isabella and Yunmi, who often felt uneasy about her daughter's behaviour. Isabella began showing unusual signs, talking to herself, laughing without reason, and becoming increasingly distant from her family. By 18, Isabella had dropped out of school and had become harder to control. Her mother, a strict woman, tried to maintain discipline in the house. However, the arguments between mother and daughter grew more heated over time. On one occasion, Isabella spat in her mother's face and sent her a message saying, "You will pay." On August 28, 2013, at the family's home on 2624 South Lima Street in Aurora, Colorado, Yunmi called the police out of fear over Isabella's behaviour. Officers arrived and warned Isabella that she could be kicked out of the house if she didn't follow the rules. Later that afternoon, Isabella's biological father, Robert, also tried speaking with her, urging her to respect her mother and stepfather, but the conversation led nowhere. At around 10 o'clock that night, while Yunmi was showering in the upstairs bathroom, Isabella quietly locked the door. No one knows exactly what set her off, but with a knife in her hand, Isabella began her attack. She stabbed her mother 151 times, 31 times in the face and 48 times in the neck, an act of violence far beyond imagination. Yunmi, unclothed and completely defenseless, collapsed in a pool of blood. At that moment, Ryan Hoy, Isabella's stepfather, heard a loud noise from upstairs. When he rushed up, he saw blood seeping from under the bathroom door. Breaking it open, he was met with a horrific sight. His wife, Yunmi, lying motionless, her body covered in stab wounds, and Isabella standing there silently, knife in hand. Without hesitation, Isabella ran out of the house, wearing a pink sweatshirt and turquoise shorts, leaving the crime scene behind. Police were quickly called, and a manhunt for Isabella began. In a state of panic and out of control, she wandered through the night. The next day, August 29th, 2013, police found her at a parking lot at 2851 South Parker Road, near East Hamden Avenue. The picture you see might look completely normal, but in truth, under the stairs was hiding a murderer. Isabella was arrested without resistance, ending her short-lived escape. During the investigation, what made the case more complex was Isabella's mental state. Psychiatrists diagnosed her with schizophrenia. Isabella claimed she didn't realise she was attacking her mother, but believed she was killing an evil entity named Cecilia to save the world. Hallucinations and voices in her head had driven her actions, leaving her unable to distinguish right from wrong. At trial, Isabella was charged with first-degree murder and other violent offences. However, thanks to testimony from mental health experts, she was found not guilty by reason of insanity. Instead of serving time in prison, Isabella was committed to the Colorado Mental Health Institute in Pueblo for treatment. The photo of Richard Ramirez. Richard Ramirez was born on February 29th, 1960, in El Paso, Texas, into a large Mexican immigrant family. The youngest of 5 children, his early life was overshadowed by violence. His father, Julian, a former police officer, often took out his anger on his wife and children through severe beatings. At the age of 5, Ramirez suffered 2 head injuries, once when a dresser fell on him, and another time when he was knocked down by a swing. These injuries led to a diagnosis of temporal lobe epilepsy, causing frequent seizures and increasing his social withdrawal. By the age of 10, to avoid his father's beatings, Ramirez began sleeping in a local cemetery, where he also started using drugs, from marijuana to LSD and cocaine. His cousin, Miguel, a Vietnam War veteran, returned home and shared horrific stories of violence, along with photographs of women being tortured. At 13, Ramirez witnessed Miguel shoot and kill his wife right in front of him. That image burned into his memory, combining with his growing belief in Satanism, planting the seeds for a deeply warped psyche. In 1984, at the age of 24, Ramirez moved to California, where he began his killing spree. His first recorded murder took place on June 28, 1984, when he broke into the home of 79-year-old Jenny Vincow in Glassell Park, Los Angeles. He nearly decapitated her with a knife, leaving a fingerprint on the window screen. For almost a year, Ramirez paused his serious killings, but continued committing burglaries to support his drug habit. By the spring of 1985, he returned with a wave of brutal crimes that plunged California into fear, earning him the nickname nickname the Night Stalker from the police. Starting in March 1985, Ramirez increased the frequency of his attacks. On March 17th, he shot and killed 34-year-old Dale Okazaki and wounded 22-year-old Maria Hernandez in Rosemead. Hernandez survived when the bullet deflected off the keys she was holding. That same day, he dragged 30-year-old Veronica Yu from her car and shot her to death in Monterey Park. Ramirez's victims spanned men, women, children, and the elderly, from white to Asian to Latino. On March 27th, he broke into the home of Vincent and Maxine Zazara in Whittier, shot Vincent, and stabbed and gouged out Maxine's eyes, placing them in a jewelry box. This act, along with an avia shoe print, became key evidence. Ramirez often left satanic symbols, such as pentagrams, and sometimes demanded victims swear allegiance to the devil. On July 4th, 1985, 16-year-old Whitney Bennett was at home in Sierra Madre, California. Earlier that evening, she had called out to her father, Steve Bennett, who was watering plants outside, by opening her ground floor bedroom window, forgetting to lock it afterward. That night, after visiting friends and returning home around 1 a, Whitney changed into her nightclothes and fell asleep with the light on and curtains open. Her parents had gone to bed earlier after hosting guests. That night, Richard Ramirez, dressed in black and carrying a steel bar, silently approached the house. He climbed through Whitney's bedroom window and entered the room where she lay sleeping. Ramirez struck her repeatedly in the head with the bar, causing severe injuries. Blood covered the room as he ransacked it for jewelry. Failing to find a knife in the kitchen, Ramirez returned and tried to strangle her with a telephone cord. The cord sparked with electricity and Whitney suddenly started breathing again. Believing that Jesus had intervened to save her, Ramirez panicked and fled, leaving the bar and a bloody shoe print behind. The photo you are looking at is the image of Whitney's bedroom after the break-in. When Whitney regained consciousness, she was in pain and disoriented, the room pitch black, the phone cord severed. She screamed for her parents, staggered into the hallway and collapsed. Her father, Steve, rushed to her side, horrified to find her covered in blood. Whitney was rushed to the hospital, where doctors stitched 478 wounds on her scalp. She also required reconstructive surgery to repair her face and neck due to the extensive injuries. Despite the severity, she miraculously survived. Just 2 days later, on July 7th, Ramirez struck again in Monterey Park, breaking into the home of 60-year-old Joyce Lucille Nelson, beating and stomping her face to death, leaving an avia shoe print on her face. That same day, he attacked 63-year-old Sophie Dickman, also in Monterey Park, handcuffing her, raping her, and stealing jewelry, forcing her to swear on Satan that he had taken all valuables. Throughout July and August, Ramirez continued his assaults. On July 20th, he killed Max and Leela Niding in Glendale with a machete and a gun, then shot Chainaron Kovananth in Sun Valley and raped his wife and young son. On August 8th, he shot Elias Aboath in Diamond Bar and raped his wife. Each crime bore marks of brutality and satanic symbolism, intensifying fear in the community. Detectives Frank Salerno and Gil Carrillo gradually connected the cases through the avia shoe prints and patterns of the crimes. The attack on Whitney Bennett provided a crucial lead, the bloody shoe print and the steel bar left behind. On August 24th, Ramirez attacked Bill Carnes and raped Inez Erickson in Mission Viejo. A teenager named James Romero recorded his license plate number, leading police to an abandoned Toyota containing Ramirez's fingerprints. On August 30th, Ramirez's name and photo were released to the public. The next day, in East Los Angeles, he was recognized at a convenience store and chased by residents, who subdued him with a steel bar until police arrived. He was arrested on August 31st, 1985. In 1989, Ramirez went on trial, facing 43 charges, including 13 murders. Whitney Bennett, then 20 years old, bravely testified despite her head injury clouding her memory of the attack. She wept as she described the blood and ransacked room, even though she couldn't recall the attacker's face. Her testimony, along with the shoe print and steel bar, helped secure the case against Ramirez. He was sentenced to death on November 7th, 1989. During the trial, he displayed defiance, shouting, "Hail Satan," and saying, "Death is part of the game." He died in 2013 from lymphoma at San Quentin prison before the sentence could be carried out. The photo of Gary Hinman. The story begins in the summer of 1969 in Topanga Canyon, Los Angeles. Gary Allen Hinman, a 34-year-old musician, was living a peaceful life in a modest home at 964 Old Topanga Canyon Road. Known for his gentle nature and devotion to Nichiren Shoshu Buddhism, random, he taught music and worked at a local instrument shop. His home often served as a refuge for friends, including members of a strange, wandering group led by a charismatic figure from the music and hippie scene, Charles Manson. But on Friday, July 25th, 1969, Bobby Beausoleil, a 21-year-old musician and core member of Manson's family, showed up at Gary's door. With him was Susan Atkins, one of Manson's most fervent followers, and Mary Brunner. Charles Manson, leader of this ragtag family, had sent them on a mission. He believed Gary, rumoured to own stocks, property, and 2 cars, had a small fortune in cash or asset. Manson and his group were desperate after a failed drug deal and a violent clash with a dealer named Bernard Crowe, and now saw Gary as an easy target to fund their planned escape to Death Valley. At first, Gary welcomed the trio into his home, unaware of their intentions. The conversation may have started out friendly, but it quickly turned tense. Beausoleil, Atkins, and Brunner demanded money or valuables, but Gary insisted he had nothing of worth, no cash, no valuable stocks. Frustrated and unwilling to leave empty-handed, the trio decided to hold Gary hostage in his own home. On July 26th, Charles Manson himself arrived at Gary's house with Bruce Davis, another loyal family member. Manson, a small but intimidating man with a violent streak, grew angry that the situation had not been resolved. In a burst of rage, he pulled out a samurai sword and slashed Gary across the left ear and cheek. The blade left a deep, bloody wound. Dazed and in pain, Gary begged them to stop. Manson ordered Beausoleil, Atkins, and Brunner to finish it and left, taking one of Gary's prized possessions, a Fiat station wagon. By July 27th, Gary, battered and bleeding, still refused to give in. Beausoleil, now fearing that if they released Gary he would go to the police, made his decision. He stabbed Gary twice in the chest with a knife. As Gary struggled to breathe, Atkins and Brunner joined in, pressing a pillow over his face to suffocate him. In his final moments, Gary recited Buddhist chants, but he could not survive. With Gary's lifeless body on the floor, the trio set about covering their tracks. To mislead the police, Beausoleil dipped his hand in Gary's blood and scrawled the words, "Political Piggy," on the living room wall, the very photo you are looking at, along with a paw print meant to evoke the symbol of the Black Panthers, a radical group Manson despised. The Manson family hoped to frame the Panthers, creating chaos and deflecting suspicion. Before leaving, they ransacked the house and took Gary's other vehicle, a Volkswagen bus. On July 31st, 1969, Gary's friends grew worried when they hadn't heard from him. Visiting his home, they found his decomposing body in the living room, surrounded by flies. Police were called and the investigation began. The bloody writing on the wall and the paw print initially baffled investigators, but fingerprints at the scene, especially those belonging to Beausoleil, quickly identified the killer. Beausoleil was arrested on August 6th, 1969, after being found sleeping in Gary's stolen Volkswagen bus near San Luis Obispo. Atkins and Brunner were later implicated, and Manson himself was tied to the crime through their statements. In 1970, Beausoleil was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death, though the sentence was later reduced to life in prison. Manson, Atkins, and Davis also faced charges in connection with the killing. The photo of Jesse McBane and Patricia Mann. In 1971, in Durham, North Carolina, 19-year-old college student Jesse McBane and 20-year-old nursing student Patricia Mann, who was training at Watts Hospital, were a deeply devoted couple. On February 12, 1971, they dressed in their finest clothes and took a photo, their radiant smiles glowing with happiness, before heading to the Valentine's dance at Watts Hospital. The dance was a lively event, filled with music. As always, Jesse and Patricia were inseparable. They danced, they talked, and their affection for each other was obvious to everyone around. Around 11:30 that night, they decided to leave early, perhaps in search of a private moment. They drove to a secluded spot near Hillendale Golf Course, a location known as Lover's Lane, where couples often park to enjoy time alone. That night was cold, the air crisp, and it seemed as though the whole world belonged only to them. But Jesse and Patricia never returned home. By the next day, February 13th, a search was launched. Friends, family, and local authorities scoured Durham, hoping to find any trace of the couple. Jesse's car was soon discovered, locked and abandoned on Lover's Lane. Inside, investigators found 2 coats and Patricia's socks neatly placed, but no fingerprints, as if someone had carefully wiped the vehicle clean. For nearly 2 weeks, search teams combed the area. The community rallied, offering a $500 reward, which Governor Bob Scott later raised to $5,000 in April 1971, in a desperate bid for answers. But the breakthrough came on February 25th, in the most heartbreaking way. A surveyor, working in the dense woods of Duke Forest near Orange County, stumbled upon what he first thought was a mannequin. But as he drew closer, the grim truth came into view. In a small clearing, Jesse McBane and Patricia Mann lay there, their bodies bound to a tree with rope, their upper bodies slumped forward. Both had been tortured, their necks bore marks of repeated strangulation. Tight tightening, loosening, and tightening again, prolonging their agony for hours. Patricia's body also showed another act of cruelty. A half-inch tear in her liver, likely caused by a hard punch to the abdomen, possibly to silence her screams or as part of a desperate struggle to break free. The scene was partially covered with leaves. The investigation began immediately. Multiple agencies, the Orange County Sheriff's Office, the Durham County Sheriff's Office, the Durham Police Department, and the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation became involved, since the abduction took place in Durham County, but the bodies were found in Orange County. This overlap in jurisdiction led to confusion and mistakes. From the start, suspicion fell on a doctor from the Watts Hospital School of Nursing, where Patricia studied. Rumours spread that he had pursued Patricia romantically, despite her relationship with Jesse, fueling speculation that jealousy or rejection might have been the motive. The doctor refused to take a polygraph test or provide a DNA sample. In 1971, authorities secretly collected his DNA, yet his possible involvement remained unclear. The investigation stalled and the case gradually went cold. The photo of Jodi Arias in the fall of 2006, at a conference in Las Vegas, 29-year-old salesman and motivational speaker Travis Alexander met 26-year-old photographer Jodi Arias. Travis, who lived in Mesa, Arizona, was quickly drawn to Arias' smile and charm. They began a long-distance relationship, with Arias living in Palm Desert, California, about 300 miles from Mesa. In the beginning, their love seemed intense. They exchanged hundreds of text messages, talked for hours on the phone, and met frequently. However, beneath the romantic surface, cracks soon began to show. Travis, a devout Mormon, valued his religious beliefs, while Arias, once a non-believer, had converted in order to be closer to him. Their relationship, however, was unstable. Travis wanted to keep things casual, while Arias became increasingly possessive. After just 9 months, in June 2007, they broke up. Even so, the two continued to stay in touch and often had sexual encounters. After the breakup, Arias moved from California to Mesa, near Travis's home, and she would frequently show up unannounced, check his emails, and monitor his social media accounts. Once, she was caught lurking outside his house at night. Travis, though uncomfortable, maintained a loose relationship with Arias, largely due to physical attraction. However, he began to seek something more serious. By early 2008, Travis planned to take another woman, Mimi Hall, on a trip to Cancun, a trip he had originally intended to take with Arias. This decision seemed to ignite Arias' intense jealousy. In May 2008, Travis sent Arias harsh messages, calling her a sociopath and the lowest of the low. Feeling betrayed and rejected, Arias began to form a plan. On May 28, 2008, 1 week before the murder, her grandparents' home in Eureka, California was burglarized, and a .25 caliber ACP handgun was stolen. On June 2nd, Arias rented a Ford Focus in Redding, California. She specifically requested a white car to avoid drawing attention and brought along 3 5-gallon cans of gasoline. She also turned off her phone to avoid being tracked. On the night of June 3rd, Arias drove more than 1,000 miles from Eureka to Mesa, arriving at Travis's home at around 4 o'clock in the morning on June 4th. Travis, suspecting nothing, let her in. They spent the morning together, having sex and taking nude photographs. Arias, being a photographer, used a camera to capture intimate moments, including pictures of Travis in the shower. Yes, the very photo you're looking at. That afternoon, while Travis was in the shower, she entered holding a knife and a gun. She stabbed him 27 times, targeting his chest, back, and head. One stab wound severed his jugular vein, common carotid artery, and windpipe, causing him to bleed out rapidly. Travis tried to fight back, leaving multiple defensive wounds on his hands, but he could not escape Arias' rage. Finally, she shot him in the head. After the killing, she dragged Travis's body into the shower, attempted to clean the scene by doing laundry, and placed the camera in the washing machine. She then left Mesa and drove to West Jordan, Utah, to meet another romantic interest, Ryan Burns. On June 5th, she acted as though nothing had happened, even explaining cuts on her hands as the result of working at a restaurant. Arias also called Travis and left a voicemail, pretending to check in an attempt to create an alibi. Meanwhile, Travis's body went undiscovered until June 9th, when concerned friends, unable to reach him, went to check his home. They found him in the shower with horrific injuries. Police quickly identified Arias as the prime suspect, thanks to the photographs recovered from the camera and other evidence, such as her fingerprints at the scene. Arias was arrested in July 2008. At first, she denied any involvement, claiming 2 intruders had killed Travis. Later, she changed her story, admitting to killing him, but claiming it was self-defense because he had attacked her. However, the level of violence and the evidence of premeditation contradicted her account. The jury ultimately found Arias guilty of first-degree murder on May 8th, 2013. After lengthy debates over sentencing, she was sentenced to life in prison without parole on April 13th, 2015. She is currently serving her sentence at the Arizona State Prison Complex. The photo of Sydney Loofe. The story begins in Lincoln, Nebraska, where 24-year-old Sydney Loofe worked as a cashier at Menards, a local home improvement store. Sydney lived in an apartment with her family. In November 2017, she began exploring new relationships through the dating app Tinder, where she connected with someone using the name Audrey. In reality, she was speaking with 25-year-old Bailey Boswell. The two quickly hit it off, exchanging messages and making plans to meet. On November 14th, 2017, Sydney went on her first date with Audrey. The evening seemed to go well. Sydney returned home safely. The next day, November 15th, she agreed to a second date with Audrey and was excited about the budding relationship. She told her family she would be going out that evening. By November 16th, Sydney's family began to worry. She had not called or texted in more than a day. Sydney's mother, Susie Loofe, reported her missing to the Lincoln Police Department. Investigators focused on her last known activity, the Tinder date. They quickly traced the account back to Bailey Boswell, who lived in Wilbur, Nebraska, about 40 miles from Lincoln. Boswell was not acting alone. She had a close relationship with 52-year-old Aubrey Trail, a man with a criminal history involving theft and fraud. The pair lived together in a basement apartment and presented themselves as a couple, but their relationship was anything but ordinary. Trail, who called himself a vampire and led a group of young women he referred to as witches, held a disturbing sway over Boswell and others. As police honed in on Trail and Boswell, the pair did something unusual. Before any charges were filed or a body was found, they posted videos on Facebook proclaiming their innocence. In one video, Trail insisted he had nothing to do with Sydney's disappearance, while Boswell sat beside him, nodding in agreement. These videos raised eyebrows. Why did they feel the need to publicly defend themselves so early? Investigators became more suspicious when they learned that Trail and Boswell had been seen on November 15th at a Home Depot purchasing tools, a handsaw, tin snips, a utility knife, and 30-gallon trash bags, items all recorded on surveillance cameras. On December 4th and 5th, 2017, the search for Sydney ended in tragedy. In rural Clay County, about 60 miles from Wilbur, authorities discovered trash bags scattered along remote roads near Edgar, Nebraska. Inside were the dismembered remains of Sydney Loofe, cut into 14 pieces. Her body had been meticulously dismembered, and part of her upper left arm was never found. The coroner determined her death was caused by homicidal violence, including strangulation, possibly with an electrical cord. As the investigation deepened, a chilling picture emerged. Aubrey Trail was not just a con man. He fancied himself a supernatural figure, a self-proclaimed vampire who led a small group of young women, including Boswell, whom he called his witch queen. Trail preached that killing could grant supernatural powers such as mind reading or flight. He told one 22-year-old woman that she needed to commit murder to join his inner circle, even suggesting her abusive foster father as a target. Trail and Boswell's lifestyle was a blend of manipulation, crime, and bizarre rituals. They ran scams selling fake antiques, swindled people out of money, and controlled their witches with promises of power and wealth. Evidence suggested they used Tinder to lure women into their influence. Sydney, it seemed, had been targeted. Trail later claimed in court that Sydney's death was an accident, saying she had died during a consensual sexual encounter involving erotic asphyxiation, a claim he called a sexual fantasy gone wrong. He admitted to panicking afterward, dismembering her body and disposing of it to hide the evidence. They cleaned the apartment with bleach, leaving a strong chemical smell noted by investigators. Trail revealed even more disturbing details. He claimed he had drained Sydney's blood and placed it, along with her spirit, in a location law enforcement would never find. He said her remains were arranged in a specific way to aid in her rebirth, and that Clay County was chosen for its special cemetery. He even mentioned leaving a sex toy with the body as an apology. Aubrey Trail stood trial in 2019. Despite his claim of accidental death, evidence of premeditation, the purchase of tools, testimony about his cult-like beliefs, and the methodical dismemberment convinced the jury. On July 10th, 2019, he was found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. In June 2021, he was sentenced to death, a rare penalty in Nebraska. At sentencing, Trail showed no remorse, even shouting in court that he wished Sydney's family could have witnessed her death so they would understand it was an accident. And the photo you are looking at is the last one she took before going out that night. Alright, that's the end of today's video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to support the channel. Thanks so much for watching all the way to the end.